Okay viewers, this has the potential to be a very long video, so I'm going to try my best to let it not be. This week's topic is actually to talk about any Celtic resources that we may have about Celtic culture or Celtic mythology, and knowing that not everyone on the channel may be specifically involved in researching the Celtic sphere, I thought that it would also be good for us to talk about anything that we have a lot of resources to share, and also that way I thought it might be better helpful to our viewers who may not all be looking to research the Celtic sphere. But I will begin with my things that are Celtic in relation. I don't know if you can see me in this frame. Hello, if so. So starting with the Celtic and Celtic mythology realm, I have first here, not something that you would immediately think of, the Celtic Tarot. And the reason that I bring this out is because sometimes tarot decks and oracle decks and things of that nature are themed and within a specific cultural guideline. So I have the Celtic Tarot here, as well as this oracle deck, Celtic Messages, and I actually read both of these. I've learned more about Celtic culture from this one, however, because the booklet and the cards are specifically go along with elements of Celtic culture. For example, one card might be the sea, as in the ocean, and the meaning of the card is specifically in relation to what significance the sea had to the Celts, which does not mean the same thing if you're thinking of it in other cultural terms. So I've put those there for that reason. I also have a book of Irish fairy tales, which I just thought I would bring out in relation to this topic. It has some pictures in it and things like that, and all manner of different fairy tales, specifically Irish in this case. But I have many other fairy tale books on my other shelf, which I showed earlier in the clip, but I didn't want to get everything down and talk about everything. Somewhat related to Celtic culture, of course, if you were specifically studying Druidry, I would of course recommend looking at Danni's channel, Danni Niles, one of our subs, because she is a druid. This was recommended to me by someone, and then it was not recommended by many other people. So this is one of those things that, you know, I read just to read it and see what it was like and see what I liked about it and what I didn't. And I did work all the way through it and read through it. And there were a lot of things that I did not enjoy about this book, and there were some things that I really did take from it. So this is one of those things that you have to look at the reviews either way and take what works for you and do away with what doesn't. This week's questioner also talked about Celtic mythology, so I have these books, World Mythology and Legends 2nd edition. I have A through Z. This is actually the second volume. I just pulled one of them off my shelf to show you the cover. But I have both of these, the Facts on File Encyclopedia, and it's all different mythology in encyclopedia format, so it is alphabetical, from all different cultures all over the world. So that would be something that I would go to if I were looking for Celtic mythology in a larger sense, or I wanted to look at it through everything, through an encyclopedia format. I also have Aradia, Gospel of the Witches, which is, in a way, a mythology of Aradia, written by Charles Leyland. There's that. Of course, Edith Hamilton's mythology. This was required reading for me in high school. This is Greek mythology in particular. I have Ovid's The Metamorphoses, which is in my drama and plays section of my home library, but is also mythology. And finally, I have this book, Living Wisdom's The Goddess, which is all different mythology of different goddesses throughout the world and throughout different cultures. So I read this when I was specifically wanting to learn more about the goddess in her many forms. And this talks about her in different cultures, as well as just in different, for example, the Virgin as a classical ideal, the death side of the goddess, and then it goes into more contemporary. So there's a lot just about the goddess in particular in this. The next thing I think of when I think of Celtic resources that I have is this book by Oak, Ash, and Thorn, Modern Celtic Shamanism by DJ Conway. I really immensely enjoy this book. And after I read it all the way through a couple of summers ago, I go back to it quite often, and I really enjoyed getting into shamanism with this book. It also is specifically from a Celtic standpoint, so that definitely colored the way that I got into it. But so I think of this as being a specific Celtic resource that I have in my home library as well. This book, Totem Magic by Yasmin Galenorn, it's Totem Magic Dance of the Shapeshifter. I include this within my shamanism area, even though this one is more about shape-shifting and animal totems. By Land, Sky, and Sea is by G'day Parma, who is a personal friend of our friend, Brendan, our Monday sub. I got this a couple of years ago and read through it. This is 3 realms of shamanic witchcraft, so that's why it's also included in my shamanism section. and I really enjoy this book, to say the absolute least that I can about it. I have this book, In the Shadow of 13 Moons, which is more about shadow work and specifically having to do with the moon, and it's meant to be completed over a year's time, but I have been stopped in the middle of it for quite some time, getting past a point where I needed to spend more time on one subject, so you can certainly do it that way as well. And then this book used to be my mother's, Earth Medicine, Revealing Hidden Teachings of the Native American Medicine Wheel by Kenneth Meadows. So this one is more specifically about Native American animal totems and their meanings and all manner of different things that have to do with them. And the last one in this stack is Animal Wisdom, Harness the Power of Animals to Liberate Your Spirit by Susie Green. So this one is along the same lines, but specifically having to do, again, with animals and their messages for us. It's not exhaustive, of course, but there you have it. Bringing down a few rows from the back of the pile, here I have my sort of general paganism and history of paganism and learning about general paganism stuff pile, the Everything Paganism book. I use this all the time. It has a lot of basic information. So it has a little bit about Wicca, a little bit about Celtic views, a little bit about Asatru, a little bit about Egyptian practices, a little Druidry, a little this, a little that. Everything. So I really enjoy this book, and I loan this to people who want to get sort of a basic idea of things. So there's that. Drawing Down the Moon by Margot Adler, of course, is more of a history of paganism in America and neo-paganism in America. I actually did read this whole thing. I guess I must have been rereading it. But I read this, I think, right after I graduated college, so about 3 years ago, and I really enjoyed it. It was harder to get through because it is rather thick and it is more of a history, but if you're interested in the history of neo-paganism in America, then, of course, it's quite easy to get through. Some parts are easier than others, or were for me. These two books were my mother's, Wheel of the Year and Ancient Ways, both by Pauline Campanelli, illustrated by Dan Campanelli. So these are in my general witchcraft paganism pile for the purposes of this video. This book goes by the months of the year, and this one goes by the Sabbats. So they cover some of the same things, but not in the same ways. Modern Pagans, I got this at the Half Price bookstore. It's interviews of all different pagans, and so there was a little bit about Celtic paths, a little bit about, the Ravenheart family, Starhawk, Margot Adler, Isaac Bonowitz was interviewed. So there's a little bit of all different types of pagan subjects because of all the different types of people who were interviewed. Love, love, love this book. Learned a lot from it. Excellent. Really glad I found this. And then, of course, if you want to go for a more general modern paganism view, but from the male point of view, the young man's guide is The Way of the Horned God by our very own, here at Pagan Perspective, Dancing Rabbit. This is my copy that was signed for me, and I really like this. I actually did do a video reviewing this, which I will link in the description and on the screen so you can see my review of this book. And Circle Round, Raising Children in Goddess Traditions. This is next to my general paganism pile, but since it is about specifically raising children and more family things, I put it off to the side. I love this book. I use it all the time for my rituals because I love incorporating music and crafts and stories. So there's little songs for everything. There are recipes, crafts, all different manner of things, and I think that's excellent for being able to involve anybody in your rites. And also just for me, it's perfect because I just like to sing and dance and have a good time. And then speaking of crafts, I have Spell Crafts, Creating Magical Objects by Scott Cunningham and David Harrington. I really enjoy this because it is literally just all creating magical objects, which is fun if you're a crafty, hands-on person. And the other things that are in this pile are The Supermarket Sorceress, which is a bunch of simple spells and charms and things that are all using things that you could find in the kitchen or things that you could buy at the supermarket, which was really great for me years ago when that's the majority of what I had access to. And then I also put Cunningham's Encyclopedia of Magical Herbs in this pile, just because it also involves sort of crafting with herbs and things like that, so they're sort of connected to me. And then since we're talking about Scott, the late Scott Cunningham, these of course are my main resource for Wicca. This is what I loaned to my mother when I wanted her to be able to understand a bit more about what I was talking about when I was talking about Wicca. So there's the first one and the sequel, Living Wicca. Scott Cunningham also wrote Earth Power, and there's a sequel to this, which I believe is called Earth, Air, Fire, Water, or some order of those elements. And these are techniques of natural magic. So stone magic, water magic, magic using nature, which, as you know about me at this point, is something that I love to do. And then related to that, I have two other books here that are about nature's role in my path. This book I I'm currently in the middle of reading. I haven't finished it yet. Woman, Spirit, Awakening in Nature. I got this at my Unitarian Universalist Church's bookstore. And I borrowed this from my UU Church's library, Spirit and Nature, Why the Environment is a Religious Issue. And I was reading this in preparation for using it as part of my Earth Day homily that I was doing. I didn't finish it. However, it's pretty hard for me to get through. It was all essays that were delivered at this conference in 1990, and they're all very interesting, which is why I still have it and I'm still working my way through it. The rest of the piles that I have set out here on the bed are specific things that, if you wanted to learn more about this thing, I have books on it, and that's where I would go. So I have the Element Encyclopedia of Secret Signs and Symbols, which was given to me by a friend who had it. I have several of these Element Encyclopedias. I have the one that's about the psychic world, I have this one, and maybe it's my mom has another one. These might be the only two I have, but I use a lot of symbolism, and I like to read about different symbols and their meanings from all different cultures and stuff like that. If you were learning about spiritualism and the role of the spirit, this is a poster that I got in Lilydale, New York. That would be where I would send someone. I would say, research Lilydale, research the history of spiritualism in that way. These are the principles. And also Raymond Buckland. Raymond Buckland, this is the Spirit book. So this is the book of his that I have. It was my mom's, which is why I have it, which is specifically related to spiritualism. And he does a lot of talks and lectures at Lilydale, which is in Lilydale, New York, here in the States. So I would recommend looking into his work if you were looking into spiritualism as well. Here I have Starhawk, the Spiral Dance, and the 12 Wild Swans, which I'm never sure how to categorize them, because they're about goddess religion, they're about reclaiming, and so I guess that's as specific as it gets, but I kind of think of Starhawk as being in her own little category. I couldn't really put her in any other pile. So I have these, absolutely recommend these. This is also recommended on the Huffington Post list of essential pagan books. A few of the things that I have are, a few of the things that I've read are, and I will link you to that as well. And it's also on my blog post of my recommended books. It links to that Huffington Post article there as well. If you were researching specifically magic and writing your own magic, Write Your Own Magic, The Hidden Power in Your Words by Richard Webster. This is all about written magic, how to write your own spells, and also the power of the written word in magic as opposed to other forms of magic where you're not writing down words and reading a word that has been physically inscribed on something. So that's what this one is. And then I have the Goodly Spell Book, which is just pretty much about magic and spells and all different manner of things related to it. This chapter is about movement and gestures. There's a section on numbers, a section on colors, and just all different types of things that could be related to magic and the practice thereof. If you were studying aromatherapy, I have Scott Cunningham's Magical Aromatherapy, Kendra Grace Aromatherapy Pocketbook, and these were my mother's. So I haven't read this one yet, and I haven't read much of this one. But this is the New Life Library Instant Aromatherapy for Stress Relief, which is probably something that I should read these days. Speaking of Richard Webster, Aura Reading for Beginners, What Color is Your Aura by Barbara Bowers. So those are my two aura books. Scrying for Beginners, I put these together because these books are from the same series, and I got them together from my mom. And this one is somewhat related, How to Do Psychic Readings Through Touch. So these are all specific skills, aura reading, scrying, and then psychic readings through touch. This is my one little bitty book on the runes, Practical Guide to the Runes by Lisa Peschel. I really enjoyed reading this a couple of years ago when I was working for a man at the medieval fair who makes and sells runes. I was reading this to become a little bit more familiar with it. And of course, if you're looking into anything Norse, anything involved with the runes, I recommend Eric, who used to be on the Pagan Perspective for several years. He's a good friend of mine, and I always think of him when I think of Norse things in general. I did mention Danni Niles when I was talking about Druidry earlier, but I forgot to mention when I talked about Greek mythology that if you're looking into anything Greek or anything related to Hellenism, my go-to guy is Priest Christopher, who used to be on YouTube, which is how I got to know him, but now mostly just operates from his blog, and I'll link to him there. I reference him a lot when I'm talking about Greek and Hellenist subjects. But now moving on, these are my couple books about crystals. The Crystal Zodiac, Crystal Awareness, which is a really nice one. This is by Catherine Bowman. Got this one from my mom as well. Actually, all of these are from my mom. Most of my books if I didn't personally buy them, they came to me from my mother, and that's the only reason that I have all these books. You can see where I got my love of books. This one is The Magic of Crystals, Color, and Chakra, and it's more of a picture encyclopedia, so this is not something that I have read, but it's something that I reference. Speaking of going to specific people for specific things, this is the Lethia Tradition of Paganism and Witchcraft, 1st edition, by Sheldon Slinkard, who we know, of course, from Pentacles of Pride. I'm wearing the shirt right now. And good friend of mine, of course. So if you're interested in learning about Lethia, you have to have this book because it is literally the book on Lethia. There isn't another one that has been shared with the public until now. Okay, winding down. To represent Unitarian Universalism, I have the manuscript Just the Words by Jim Scott, who is a Unitarian Universalist musician, singer-songwriter. This is a manuscript of many of his poems and songs. It's just the lyrics from all of his albums. So that's representing UUism for my library. I don't have any books on Unitarian Universalism, but I would recommend, if you want to learn more about it, to go to the Unitarian Universalist Association website at uua.org. This is my book 1001 Meditations, How to Discover Peace of Mind by Mike George. It is literally just 1001 tiny meditations. It can be a quote, it could be something that they want you to think about, it could be an exercise. It's just all manner of different things, so I love picking this up and reading a couple when I just want to think about something or when I want to have a little mini meditation. Love this book. So if you're someone who likes little meditations or just likes looking at what a meditation could be, this is a nice one. I have this small stack of things that are sort of Tibetan Buddhist related, Dalai Lama related. You've all seen me mention these cards on my personal channel. Words of Wisdom from His Holiness the Dalai Lama. They're just little cards with quotes of his that someone put together and made into this deck. So they're all different quotes by him, and I like to change it and look at the next one and reflect on that also as sort of a meditation. It seems that my camera stopped recording, so I need to go quickly. The Tibetan Prayer Flag Pack is a little book and a make-your-own prayer flag kit, so talking just about prayer flags and their role in the culture and the different ways that you can interpret them, the different symbolism of them. And then I have the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which I have begun attempting to read, but only got through the introduction so far, because it's kind of a big one. Of course, if you're looking into Christianity, there is no other source than the Holy Bible, Old and New Testament. These are little New Testaments, and this is the Old and New Testament. This was my mother's Bible from a couple years before I was born. So she was doing this, and let me show you, because I like this. And I know that this is where I got my sort of thing from too without even knowing. My mom would cut out different things and put them in the front and back covers of her Bible. And if you were to look at my Book of Shadows, I did the same thing in the front and back covers of my Book of Shadows. I wanted to point out that if you're interested in learning about Christo-Paganism at all, one of our members on Pagan Perspective is a Christo-Pagan, Rich, the Monday host, who you saw yesterday. There were also a few people who auditioned for Pagan Perspective this past year and in the past who identify as Christo-Pagans, so you can definitely find a lot of people identifying with that path and making videos about their path on YouTube, so that's what I would recommend for that. Women Who Run with the Wolves and Ring of Power are two of my books about sort of archetypal mythology and getting to know the sacred feminine. I'm reading through this one, haven't started this one yet. This one was also recommended by Lenora Henson, who is, segue, the author of the Wicked Garden series, which begins my pile of books that are fiction inspired by pagan themes. The Wicked Garden, this is book 1, Lenora Henson. Fantastic. I talk about it a bit more in my blog. And I interviewed her about this book, and I have yet to read the rest of them, but I'm really looking forward to it. Somewhat related to that, I met Kristen Keck at Cleveland Area Pagan Pride last summer, and this is the first book of her series, The Cassie Rivers Adventures. This is The Goddess Loves Your Shoes. I also have book 2, 3, and 4. She's working on book 5 right now. Wicked Garden has also done 4 books so far, and she's working on the 5th, or is the 5th book out now? I don't remember, but they have websites that you can check out. Confessions of a Pagan Nun by Kate Horsley is also sort of Celtic in relation, bringing this around to the beginning. Sheldon Slinkard gave me this as a gift. I really enjoyed it. The Killian Star is also Celtic in nature and was written by a personal friend of my mother's and mine, Allison Danni. This is the 1st edition, and she did tell me that she's done other revisions since then, so I'm really looking forward to reading whatever she's updated from it. And finally, Priestess of Avalon by Marion Zimmer Bradley and Diana L. Paxson, one of my absolute favorite books ever. This is also Celtic in nature because it's about Avalon and Rome when it started to become Christian from being pagan, and the conversion of the emperor and things like that. So fiction with pagan themes here. Now I really hope you can see me in this frame as I wrap it up. This was my notes for all the different categories of books that I wanted to show. So let me just make sure I touched on everything. Norse, I didn't say much about Egyptian because I don't have a lot of books related to the Egyptian pantheon, but there are books recommended on that Huffington Post article that I mentioned. There are several that are specifically about the Egyptian pantheon, and I would of course also go to Olivia Egyptian on YouTube. She's kind of who I think of when I think of Egyptian practice. Family traditions, my go-to person is our own Meghan Subirasri, who is our Wednesday host now since Eric stepped down. Non-theistic paganism, I think of our very own Yucca. Atheistic paganism, I would go to our previous sub, the other Tara, the first Tara that was on Pagan Perspective. Vampires, if you were interested in learning more about vampirism, I have some videos that I did in the past from my high school research about modern vampirism, but I would also go to Cole, who used to be on the Pagan Perspective, PurpleKillJoy on YouTube. That's my go-to guy for that. I like having one or two people that to me are very well versed in something. This is not to say that any of them are experts in that, but these are the people that I know who actually follow these paths and would have more information about it than I would. So I like being able to say, oh, well, I know someone who might know more about that, and if they don't know it personally, they would know more of the resources. Lethia, of course, Wicca, of course. The only other things that I wanted to mention, I did talk about the UUA website, and I think I mentioned the OBOD, the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids website. I also wanted to mention religiousTolerance.org and About.com's Paganism and Wicca and Witchcraft articles. Those are some of my other favorite websites. And if you go to my blog, thewitchystuff.blogspot.com, I have an FAQ page, and in there, one of the things is what are some websites and books that you would recommend. I have a link to a blog that I've done outlining some of my favorite websites like Religious Tolerance and About.com, and I have a blog post that I've started for my book recommendations where you will see many of the books that I showed in this video as well as others, and that link that I mentioned to the Huffington Post article of 27, now 29, essential pagan texts. That's my video for this week, and I'm sure you are quite done watching it. Thank you so much if you made it through this whole thing. This was mostly for Rich because he said that he was excited to see my books because he knows I have a lot of books, and I do. Unfortunately, I can't speak very much to podcasts and things like that because I don't listen to any podcasts. The only podcasts that I occasionally listen to are Roommate Pod, which is Meghan Tonjes and Keith Batista, and Welcome to Our Podcast, which is Mike Falzone and Zoya, Coffee Girl. Those are the only podcasts that I ever listen to. I don't listen to any pagan podcasts. I could talk about movies, but I think that's a totally different thing. We've actually talked about that on this channel in the way back past, and my favorites have not changed. Practical Magic, The Craft, Mists of Avalon, which you can watch on YouTube. For me, it's mostly books and websites. That's mostly what I'm about, so I hope that those sort of spark an interest, or if you were looking into something of that nature, one of those titles, maybe you want to look into it. But always, if you can't get a hold of the book, there is a ton of information online, and sometimes it's just a matter of looking at all different websites in order to compare what different sources say, so that you can get an idea of what's pretty common to all sources, and what might be something that really only one source thinks that particular thing, which could be a positive or a negative depending on what you're looking at. So, information is out there. Just go ahead and do a search, and if it comes down to wanting to know whether a source is good or bad, then go ahead and ask someone who you think might know about it, whether they know about the source, or read those reviews and see what other people have to say about them, because really, we're all out here to forge our own paths and do our own learning, but also let people know what we thought about things. So I think that you'll find personal reviews and videos and blogs by individuals to be very helpful. Thanks! I'll be quiet now. I'll see you next month because next week the subs are going to do this exact same thing. Well, not the same thing I did, but they're going to talk about resources for all different things that they know about. And we'll see you next month. Until then, don't forget to be awesome, blessed be, and goodbye.